Welcome back to Storysensei. The movie starts when the interstellar spacecraft called Avalon can be seen traveling through space on its way to Homestead 2, a colonized world across the universe. The spacecraft's rooms are all empty, and it's on autopilot. The 258 crew members and 5,000 passengers have gone into hibernation. The spacecraft suddenly crosses through an asteroid belt, weakening its defense capabilities. The ship starts self-repairs, but one of the hibernation pods wakes up Jim Preston, a mechanical engineer, as the woken passenger. His pod opens, and an automatic system supports his awakening, informing him that he has been suspended for 120 years and that the spacecraft is only 4 months away from Homestead 2. He has promised that he will be able to spend that time enjoying the ship's luxurious features prior to his arrival on the planet. Jim receives information concerning his ID band, his cabin, and the primary activities he will participate in. He gets ready and walks into an automatic-aided course made for a whole learning group. Jim appears concerned as the hologram describes the situation on Earth, describing it as overcrowded, costly, and overused. He learns that the hologram cannot respond to him and goes in search of other people. When he arrives at the bridge, he notices that none of the main crew members are awake. Jim eventually visits the observatory, where he discovers that the ship is actually 90 years away from Homestead 2. He realizes he woke up too soon and goes back to the concourse, where he tries to send a message to Earth wondering what he should do since he doesn't know how to return to hibernation. The communication system warns him the call to Earth will take 55 years to receive a response. He walks around and comes across the ship's bar, where he notices another individual. Something odd seems to be going on with him. When he's talking to the bartender, Jim discovers he's an android called Arthur. As he tries to bring him a drink, Jim wants to get more details from him, but he couldn't even explain to the robot. He sips his regular coffee while attempting to repair his hibernation chamber. He manages to get it running after gathering all of the tools and lies down inside the pod. However, nothing happens. He then chooses to use the equipment he acquired to get access to the crew's hibernation chambers that also does not work. Jim keeps going back to the bar, usually to talk to Arthur the android. Arthur gives him some suggestions which persuade him to break into one of the gold class rooms and enjoy some fun on the spaceship. Jim tries every restaurant, game, and entertainment system. But as time passes, he grows increasingly frustrated with being alone. He gets drunk one day and wanders around the hibernating pods until he comes across an airlock with spacesuits prepared for spacewalks. Jim dresses up in a suit and goes to the airlock where he pushes a lever and then a button to open the airlock door. He's caught off guard by the view once he steps outside the spacecraft. Jim lets go of the magnets on his boots and floats in space, heartbroken. He returns inside, removes the suit, and returns to the airlock without it. He pulls the lever ready to end it all but then changes his mind, hurries back inside, and slips on a bottle. Jim stands up and is immediately drawn to Aurora, a woman in one of the capsules. He searches the directories for her files and listens to her passenger interview, falling in love with her in the process. Back in the bar, he's reading some of her work and discussing it with Arthur. He becomes preoccupied with the ironies of the situation, traveling to another planet in search of a better life, waking up early and failing to arrive, and finding his ideal woman only to find her out of reach. Jim continues to think about her and begins to consider waking her up as well. He discusses it with the android, but it doesn't fully understand the problem. If he awakens her up for his own gain, he will be stranding her on the ship to suffer. Jim initially decides against it, but as time passes, he can't let it go until he changes his mind one day. He walks to her pod and successfully activates it. He hides and returns to his room. When she awakens later, he heads to the main concourse, hoping to find her, and there she is, as dumbfounded as he was a year ago. Jim informs her that they are the only ones awake and accompanies her to the observatory. Then he tells her that he can't reach the crew or the ship's main commands. Aurora panics and wishes to return to her pod. When they arrive, Jim informs her that there is no special technology on the spacecraft that can assist them in returning to hibernation, thus telling her that they are stranded. They return to the concourse, and he advises her to relax because she has just emerged from hibernation. She feels terrible for him because he has been alone on the ship for more than a year. Jim returns to the bar feeling bad about what he did. He requests that Arthur not tell Aurora that he was the one who woke her up. Aurora awakens the next day. Jim joins her, and they head out to breakfast. As they leave, the information desk malfunctions. Aurora realizes in the cantina that Jim has been eating the same breakfast for over a year and orders him one of the gold class menus. They discuss the prospect of repairing the pods, but Aurora, unlike Jim, isn't ready to give up. She investigates the infirmary, then researches documents before arriving at the crew's hibernation rooms and attempting to smash the doors open. Jim discovers further flaws throughout the ship. Aurora recalls her existence on the Avalon some months later. She writes, jogs around the ship, and swims in the pool, becoming increasingly aware of her dilemma. She goes to the restaurant to interview Jim since she thinks his story will be interesting. She inquires as to why he came to the colony. Jim responds with company slogans initially, but then goes on to say that he wishes to be somebody in the new world, to establish a life. Later, they arrive at the observatory where Aurora finally reveals why she is there. Her plan was to go to Homestead 2, live there for a year, and then return to Earth, becoming the first journalist to do so and write the greatest story ever. Aurora gradually gives up on finding a solution to their current position, and Jim devises a strategy to cheer her up. He takes her to dancing, the movies, and the basketball court. Finally, he takes her to Arthur's pub. She unwinds for a moment before remembering their situation. Jim is left alone with the robot, regretting what he's done to her. The next thing we know, he's tinkering with something, and Aurora enters into the observatory to find a miniature of the Chrysler building he built for her. They go on a date at the pub. Later on, they have dinner and tell each other stories about their lives. She explains that her father died while she was a teenager. After dinner, Jim accompanies Aurora to the airlock, where they prepare their spacesuits. They venture on a spacewalk together. Jim now has someone to share his amazing experience with. They rush back inside, kiss, go to his cabin, and sleep together. Soon after, they begin to live as a couple. Aurora moves into his cabin and begins writing about her experiences on the cruise. Jim continues his exploration of the spacecraft and discovers the hydroponics bay. He brings flowers to Aurora. The ship passes by a red giant one day, and they go to the observatory to see it. Aurora's birthday is later that night, so they celebrate in one of the ship's different restaurants and eventually the bar. While Aurora is at the bar conversing with Arthur, Jim goes to the restroom to prepare the ring he made for her. The robot informs Aurora that Jim purposefully woke her up, ignorant that he was supposed to keep it a secret. Jim reappears and she confronts him in complete frustration. She flees enraged and terrified. When Jim returns to his cabin, he discovers that all of her belongings are gone. The next day, he runs into her in a cantina, but the instant he talks, she leaves. Aurora is in severe distress. She goes over to Jim's cabin one night, hitting and kicking him and threatening to murder him. He attempts to apologize and explain his behavior to her over the intercom, but because she continues to ignore him, he tells her he loves her. However, Aurora is uninterested. She is unable to forgive him for sacrificing her life. Another failure occurs one night while Jim is in his cabin. When the spacecraft encounters a critical error, the primary command shuts down. Aurora enters the main concourse and notices Jim has planted a tree there. Later, he enters the elevator, which malfunctions. She then proceeds to the cantina where the food dispenser is also broken. Suddenly, they both hear the deck chief's voice over the comms inquiring who planted the tree. They both dash into the concourse where they notice Gus Mancuso standing in front of Jim's tree. They introduce themselves and explain the issue to the chief. He doesn't see how 3 pods could fail. Mancuso leads them to the bridge where he realizes that something is wrong with the spacecraft. When they depart the bridge, a robot nearly falls on their heads, and the two of them inform Mancuso that problems are becoming more common throughout the ship. Jim joins Mancuso as he checks on the pods. He's discovered what happened to Aurora's pod. The Det Chief regards Jim's actions as terrible. Later, while checking the collected data on the bridge, Aurora joins him. They discuss what happened to her pod, but he tells her that he can't help her. Mancuso feels sick from hibernation, so he goes to bed, but as he comes out, he coughed up blood. Aurora can't sleep that night, so she goes swimming. Suddenly, there is a disturbance of gravity throughout the spacecraft, and she begins to drown as the water from the pool flows with her. The gravity drive eventually resets, and she narrowly escapes alive. They collide on their way to find Mancuso. They're all back on the bridge, slowly figuring out what's going on with the ship. If they do not repair it, the entire ship will be stuck. They go to investigate the situation, but Mancuso passes out, so Jim and Aurora take him to the infirmary. He's dying, and there are no medicines that can stop it or extend his life. Later, the three of them meet in the observatory, and Mancuso hands Jim his ID bracelet, instructs them to fix the ship, and then dies. The light suddenly turns an alarming red, and the ship begins to shake. They eventually make it to engineering and immediately look for the cause of the problem. They find it in the power station, and Aurora is drawn in as they open the hatch. Jim is drawn in as well, but he grabs onto the hatch as it closes in on him. He eventually gets lured in as well, but they swiftly close the gap. The asteroid has caused a whole breach in that vicinity. Jim immediately notices that there is more than one breach in the system. After resolving that issue and discovering that it collided with the reactor controller module, Jim believes he can acquire replacement parts for it. They locate and replace the part, but the process of venting the reactor continues to fail. They try again manually, but it fails. Jim realizes that he must open the vent door from the outside of the spacecraft in order to cool the reactor. They both head to the airlock, and as he prepares to go, he hands Aurora Mancuso's bracelet to her because he may not return. She assists him with the space suit and tells him to come back as he walks through the airlock, saying she can't imagine living on the spaceship without him. Aurora returns to the reactor where the temperature has reached critical levels. A bolt from the reactor propels into her arm. As Jim approaches the vent from the outside and finds the door, the temperature rises in the reactor room as he attempts to open the vent door. He acknowledges that he must manually hold the door open so that the reactor can vent, and he informs Aurora of this. She objects to the idea, but he proceeds with it and instructs her to vent the reactor. She doesn't want him to die, but he reminds her that they must save the other people, so she blows up the reactor. The operation is effective, but the reactor fumes push Jim away and break his connection. The pressure in his suit is also decreasing. He informs Aurora what happened, and she rushes to find another outfit and bring him in. He apologizes to her once more. She suits up and rushes out to get him, but her connection is too short. He's being lured back, but she unexpectedly grabs his tether and pulls him in. Aurora drags Jim inside the hospital only to discover that he is already dead. She uses Mancuso's wristband to bypass medical standards and revive him. Aurora accepts his apology. Aurora later repairs Arthur, and they give Mancuso a befitting space burial. Jim brings her to the infirmary and informs her that he has discovered a way to repurpose the medical pod as a hibernation pod. He instructs her to enter the capsule and spend the remainder of the journey inside. But, as it is later revealed, she refuses and decides to remain awake on the ship with him. Jim eventually proposes to her, and they spend the rest of their lives on the spacecraft. 88 years later, the Avalon arrives on Homestead 2. The rest of the crew awakens to discover the ship in an unexpected state. Aurora leaves them a message telling them about her and Jim's time aboard the ship while the rest of them slept. If you enjoy watching movies and love this story explanation, please consider subscribing to this channel for more.